One day last fall, I guess I was feeling the need to get philosophical about having become a senior citizen. And so I reached for Cicero's great essay on old age, written about a half century before the birth of Christ. In it, he wrote that it's a natural tendency of ours, those of us who are seniors, to do things which will assist people who are to come down the path later on. He quoted the poet Scatia saying, "He plants his trees to serve a race that is to come." And then he said that a farmer, however old, would not hesitate to answer anyone who asked him for whom he was planting with the following answer: "I plant for the immortal gods, whose will it was that I should not merely receive these things from my ancestors, but also hand them on to the next generation." What an interesting thought that is. What Cicero was saying was that the gods, in his understanding of faith and mythology, relied on him to plant, so that others might one day enjoy that which they, the gods, can't produce on their own. They need help, Cicero said. They need our help. Well, in our tradition, we know something about that as well, don't we? Tempting as it might have been for the Lord to have just made stones into loaves of bread so that the hungry could be fed, our Savior replied to those of us who occasionally would like an easier path to alleviate suffering, and boy, does that ever include me, saying, "It's not the way it works. It's not the way it works. Here and now, we serve God by much more than giving in to parlor tricks." And the gospel would play out how that was the case: visiting the sick, feeding the hungry, sheltering the homeless, clothing the naked, giving hope to the despondent, freeing the captive, spreading the good news of the forgiveness of sins, and release from the sting of death. God would rely on every single one of us to do that for God. And we do all this, it seems, because somewhere deep down inside, we have a holy memory of the fact that within our ancient ancestry, whether we've experienced or not, we're called to remember that we were those who were wanderers in the wilderness. And we're not talking about a wilderness like we understand around here. We're talking about desert. Aliens in a strange land, afflicted, toiled, nearly to death, and oppressed. That's in our DNA. That's a part of who we are, this memory. And thankfully, God reminds us of not just the challenges of life, but how we can be God's hands through Christ and make an incredible difference in the life of the world. That's why we concern ourselves during Lent with these wonderful little Lenten coupon books to take a look at the blessings that we have day by day. It's also why we consider Bergen Carlos's appeal that was in the last e-letter, that we should help kids against hunger. It's because we're family. Well, last month, the vestry and I found ourselves very moved to ask us all as a church family to make an incredible difference in the life of the world during Lent. And to that end, we are challenging ourselves to pick up the tab for all of the food served at the Flathead Youth Home during the 40 days of Lent. To maintain their 8-bed facility, they spend $50 a day for those children and to provide meals for the staff. Well, 40 times 50 is $2,000, and that's a lot of money. However, we've done this before. You remember we did this when we raised the same amount to help girls in sub-Saharan Africa attend school through the organization CAMFED. So the best way to introduce the Flathead Youth Home to you is to have one of those sojourners in the wilderness who at times was an alien in a very strange land, afflicted, toiled, and every once in a while oppressed, stand before you not as a wandering Aramean, a phrase descriptive of someone from over 4,000 years ago, but as one of our own, a sister in Christ, in our time, to tell her story and how she was given relief. And to that end, I just have the extraordinary pleasure and honor to introduce to you my friend Kiera Lake, whose sense of courage, spirit, and decency has touched me in a way that is absolutely unparalleled in my 3.5 decades of ordained ministry. Ready?
All right, well, first off, I'd like to say happy Valentine's Day to everybody.
And to you. And to your dog, Annie, who is at the feet right there.
All right. Well, my name is Kiera Lake, and I was in the Flathead Youth Home 8 years ago when I was 16. Today, I want to share with everyone how much my life has changed since then, and how the Flathead Youth Home helped me become who I am today. Growing up in my household was full of turbulent emotions, domestic violence, physical and emotional neglect. And my mom had me too young, so she didn't know how to be a mom and care for me the way a mother should. My father, also being a victim of child abuse, perpetuated this cycle with me. After repeated patterns of neglect and violence at home with my parents, I was put in the Flathead Youth Home. At this point in my life, I had no one here in Montana that provided for my basic needs, let alone my emotional needs. Being in the Flathead Youth Home gave me a safe place to be, where I knew that everybody cared about me despite my mistakes. I could go to any member of the staff and talk to them without worrying about my safety or any negative repercussions. I did more in the 4 months of being in the Flathead Youth Home than I had done with my own family. We went river rafting, horseback riding, the walk in the treetops, and every Friday we would go to a lake to go swimming. When it was time for me to return home, I was scared, and things at home got worse. I was grounded from everything and everyone. They took everything out of my room, including my bed. So I slept on the floor with my dog Annie, who's 12 years old today. I was only allowed to leave my room if I was to eat, do chores, or go to the bathroom. I was grounded from not only my friends, but my family as well. I wasn't allowed to talk to my own 2 sisters who lived in the same house as me. Eventually, my sister and I decided it was more important to be a family, so we began skipping school together so that we could process what was going on and be there for each other. On one of those occasions, my mom stood by without saying a single word, as a strange woman took us for a night, which was terrifying. The next day, the woman showed up at our school pretending to be our mom, where I once again ran away. Following that, my mom came home with another woman who proceeded to cut a chunk of my hair out to test me and falsely accuse me of meth, although I had never done a drug in my life. At that moment, my dad showed up and in front of everybody, including my sister, threw me to the ground. When this happened, I knew my only option was to pretend that he had knocked me out. So I lay on the floor limp with my eyes closed, while my dad was on top of me, and he continued to yell and attack me. By the age of 17, I was on my own, whether that was living in a car, a hotel, or even a camper behind the Rainbow Bar. By this point, my parents didn't want me, nor would they let me come home, but continued to pursue me by calling me in as a runaway. This horrible period of my life came to an end when I was arrested one morning as a runaway in my pajamas and taken to see a probation officer who told my dad that he had to take me home, to which my father replied that I was not allowed to come home and he would not be taking me home, but that it was not against the law to take me camping. And with that, we left the office, and my dad began to verbally beat me down, saying that I was stupid, useless, would never amount to anything, my feelings didn't matter, and I should give up and drop out of high school. I then realized while he was yelling at me that he truly wasn't going to take me home, and he really was going to take me to the woods. But there was no camping gear, no sleeping bag, no tent, and no food. To this day, I don't know what my dad would have done to me out there, because I jumped out of the moving vehicle and got a major concussion. I woke up in the hospital, once again terrified to be released to my dad. When I finally was let go from the emergency room, my dad ended up leaving me at Woodland Park, where I once again fell unconscious. Once I awoke, I was finally able to reach out for help. After this event, I was finally able to get my case moved to a different probation officer who verbally emancipated me and demanded my parents leave me alone. If I could have been in the group home longer, things like this wouldn't have happened to me. I would have been around the people that I knew cared for me and would protect me. Ultimately, at the age of 17, I was invited to live with a wonderful family. So wonderful, I ended up marrying one of them, my husband, Matthew. Since then, I have accomplished so much. I went to school an extra year and a half to get my high school diploma. I have an associate's degree in small business management, and I've developed a passion for travel. What I want everyone to know is that I had an unfavorable past, but that doesn't mean that I have an unfavorable life. I wouldn't change my past a single bit because it made me who I am today. What I went through taught me how to be my biggest cheerleader. When everyone was trying to get me to drop out of high school, I had to push myself to stick out that extra year and a half while working and living on my own. My past taught me how to stay positive. There were times when I thought life would never get any better, and I truly was worthless, like my dad told me. I did a lot of crying and at times would wish I was dead. But I didn't want to be the person my parents made me out to be, so I stuck it out and stayed as positive as I could. This taught me how to love myself, which is important because when no one loves you, you have to love yourself to get through. Most importantly, people always say there's someone who has it worse, and they're right, there usually is. That may help you stay positive, but that doesn't mean that what you're going through doesn't hurt and isn't hard to handle, but I'm here to tell you that you can handle it and life will get better. And it's places like the Flathead Youth Home that help kids get through their story the way that they helped me get through mine. And I'd like to thank everyone for listening to my story and considering being lifesavers for people like me.